Hey friends, this is your co-host Mike, and I am here to tell you that we have a very special episode today. We have both Tim Seeley and Mike Norton on the podcast, and I don't want to waste any time. I want to get straight into the interview, but I just want to warn you that there is some profanity here. We do have the family-friendly label, but you will notice that this episode is labeled explicit because there's some language in here, and it was enough that I wasn't confident in my editing skills to get it all out, and I was like, we're just going to let it. It's going to be an explicit episode, and people can deal with it. So if you got kids in the car, save this one for later. Otherwise, I hope you dive into it right away. It may even merit re-listens. Please like and share it. Please go buy the Revival Compendium, if not for yourself, then for a friend. It's very exciting. And stay tuned next summer for the Syfy series on Revival. Enjoy. Hello, and welcome to a special edition of the Story Arcs podcast. My name is Mike.
And I'm Alex.
And today we have special guests, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
I'm Mike Norton. I draw. And, well, sometimes I write, but I mostly draw.
I'm Tim Seeley. I think we're talking about Revival, right? So I'm the co-creator and writer of Revival.
Yes, we are talking about, you have a gorgeous Revival poster just over your shoulder, which I think is the compendium cover.
Yeah, it's the fancy Jenny Frison print. And then when we were looking for a compendium, which I think released, like 5-6 years ago, Mike? Something like that. Yeah. But then when we were looking for a compendium cover, we wanted a new Jenny piece, but you have to schedule Jenny for like 14 years in advance now to get it.
That sounds right. Yeah.
How things have changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm actually looking at trying to look at the whiteboard behind you there, Tim. Are there secret things we're not supposed to know on that? Is that like a...
Yeah, probably. I probably should move that out of the way, but it's all... My handwriting is terrible, so you won't be able to tell.
All right. No problem.
It's all production notes for the show. Which, by the way, I had a few of your, like the producers from your TV show, like talk to us because they saw us covering the book. And I was like, hey, you want to come on the podcast and talk to us? We'd love to hear from you guys. And they were like, oh, that would be so much fun, but we're on media lockdown. So we are intentionally not asking you guys anything about the show. I don't know if you have the same media restriction.
Did they contact you to tell you that? There's like, don't let them talk about the show.
Yeah.
We could kind of talk about the show, obviously, but
maybe at the end there, we'd love to get your guys' thoughts.
Yeah,
because we're
super book people,
super stoked for that. Yeah.
So first question for both of you is, where did this idea Revival come from? Did it come fully formed, or was this a collaborative process? And Tim, I believe the initial origin for M as a character goes back to the idea that you had in the mid 90s, the Crow era. And, and then how did you guys go from kind of that idea and design to what Revival became?
Well, I mean, the initial, Mike knew we were sharing a studio, and we decided we should do something together at Image. So that was kind of the first real impulse, I think, was, we're both in the same place. We can make something. We knew how to make stuff at Image, which I think, is a skill for sure. And it's one you don't want to waste, I think. So, but we just had sort of various notions of what we want to do. And so the initial idea, I think, was like, well, let's do something. Mike is really good at drawing normal people. And I really want to do a crime story. And I also knew that people would buy horror stuff from me more likely than they would, buy something else. So I think that's when we started kicking around ideas. I had the rough nugget of wanting to do something where people come back from the dead, but they're not zombies. They just go back to work, kind of. And then the rough nugget of doing something set in Wisconsin, or specifically Wausau. And then I think the rest of it was a lot of Mike coming in and sort of shaping it with our input from our studio mate.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of it was like a lunchtime thing. We would always talk about it at lunch, and it was just, what do you want to do? Walking Dead was big, but we didn't want to do zombies. But I'd never really done horror before, and it was really at a time where Tim had done a lot of stuff that wasn't superheroes, but I hadn't, and so it was kind of a way to get out of that. And yeah, it was very energizing, because the whole studio would chime in while we were talking about it. It wasn't like we had boxed in offices. It's
Gotcha.
like almost like a writer's room in a way.
Okay. But it's still created by Tim Seeley and Mike Norton on every cover, not Tim Seeley and Mike Norton and every eavesdropper in the studio.
Oh yeah,
I
they're
guess
not
it's
getting any
it's
money
hard to
from this. No,
hard to
don't give
credit
them that
that.
idea.
Yeah. So, Mike, you mentioned the Walking Dead, obviously, and when this book came out in 2012, and so I'm assuming you guys have been maybe kicking this idea around for a while there. The Walking Dead was obviously huge, both as a comic, and the show had premiered a couple years earlier, I think in 2010.
Yeah, I think
So
it just started.
yeah, so like that was massive, and there was a lot of monster adjacent stuff, whether we're talking about zombies, vampires, whatever, kind of in popular culture at the time. And going back, looking at Revival, issue 1 was released the same day by Image as Walking Dead 100, which is kind of a big anniversary idea. I don't know if you guys knew that or remembered that, but I was curious.
Didn't they have like a preview in that issue?
yeah.
So
of our book?
Yeah.
that's what I was.
That's all I remember. I do remember it, but I don't. All I remember is that they had a preview of our book in it.
And that's exactly where I was going, was that your book Revival at best is like zombie adjacent, right? Because it's not zombies what we think of, like George Romero and stuff like that. And you even have a character comment on that early on, that when we think of people coming back from the dead, what we think of is The Walking Dead, Day of the Dead, Dawn of the Dead, stuff like that. You guys don't have that, but the general basic premise is very similar. So was there any, I was gonna ask, if there were any previews or anything like that for Revival in any books that would have been similar, like The Walking Dead? Like, was there a marketing for that horror aspect, Tim, that you talked about, knowing that this book really didn't really have the same, it wasn't really it was barely in the same ballpark as something like The Walking Dead? Was there an intentional marketing towards that kind of horror fan, knowing that this book actually has a lot of different aspects to it? And so from that, what do you remember of the initial response, like from maybe Walking Dead fans or horror fans or something like that, or maybe someone who followed your work, Tim, from Hack Slash or something like that, which is a little more horror specific than Revival? Just what do you remember from those early days of marketing this book in the era that it was in 10, 12 years ago?
I mean, the biggest thing is if you can get a preview in The Walking Dead, you say, yes, sir, I'll have, yes.
Yeah.
So,
that at that time, there was kind of a new wave of creators like having big number ones at Image. And I mean, Tim was working on Hack Slash, and he's realized some success with that. And so I think he was we wanted to, I'd be lying if I said we didn't want to capitalize on a little bit, but we didn't want to do zombies.
yeah.
And it's funny because he says it's a crime book, and it is, but for the longest time I didn't think it was. I was always looking at the horror part of it, and yeah, it is a very compelling mystery story, and so that's a thing that, I mean, that probably got you a lot of jobs after that.
Yeah. Well, and I also think, the way Image works, the creators get to kind of choose what advertising is in their book, what previews are in their books. It's not like Marvel or DC.
Yeah.
But, Mike and I have both known Robert Kirkman for,
Since he started, yeah.
Yeah, since some 20 some years already. So, and, we also had that era of Image where things were launching kind of big. It was even more of a, like, can we get having a platform like Walking Dead to launch your book from, you would just do anything for that. So we were really lucky. We're really thankful for Image for doing that.
Yeah.
Did it help us? By God, yes, it helped us. Because that is the same kind of reader. The kind of people who would come monthly for 100 issues of Walking Dead were the kind of people who would check out our book too. And even if it's not exactly the same, it's not exactly the same as Hack Slash either. But
but you don't want it to be.
Right. We don't want it to be. We want it to be something different. And on the other side of that, I think, is that people took Revival more seriously than stuff that we had done before, especially something like Hack Slash, where, no one was going to nominate the Hack Slash for Eisner or something like that, but they buy it for the boobies. But Revival was like a serious book, and launching from the Walking Dead preview really helped reinforce that, I think, which, we're very grateful.
That's interesting that you would, I mean, I guess when you say that, I can understand. It's almost like it's like Hack Slash the industry, people see that and it gets put into a different kind of category, right? Like there's a campiness to it or something like that. And then Revival is like the prestige TV version of
I wouldn't call prestige. It's just a different genre, I guess.
but I'm saying that it's like there's a perception in the industry about like that, right? That
Sure,
this is somehow elevated, whether you feel that way working on it or not, but it's seen from the outside. That's an interesting, but that I wouldn't have thought about that. But now that you say that, you're like, yeah, this is the kind of book. Revival is the kind of book that you would see someone would be like, oh yeah, this is serious horror. This is important or something like that. When it's really the same kind of book as anything else though.
Well, it's also, just Mike and I both got offered different kinds of work after Revival. So I don't think I would have ever gotten offered to write, Batman based on the strength of Hack Slash, probably, even though I think it's good. And I think but it's a serious book. And I think for Mike, it also gave, a chance that he could do like gritty crime stuff. He could do realistic stuff. So it did change perceptions, I think, around both of us as well.
Yeah. Well, we kind of segue into my next question pretty easily here, talking about genres, because I'm actually curious from both of you how, with the final product, how do you classify this book? Because in my mind, there's a case for it to be just considered a straight up mystery, because there's the big overarching mystery. And then there's like, the second story arc and the fourth story, or maybe it's the second and the third, each have their own like mysteries that, it's like someone died. We're looking into this. This is what we're doing for this period of time. Yet it's never quite the level of police procedural, which the first issue almost makes it seem like it's going that direction because there's the family dynamic of the police department. So there's the strong case for mystery. Yet there are times of horrific and gory action scenes that range from hacking and slashing, your specialty, to gouging out of eyes and even crucifying. So there's also that kind of horror, gory type stuff. Yet there's also the persistent supernatural theme that's always kicking around questions of philosophy and religion and metaphysics. And if that weren't enough, there's also this idea of political populism, insurgency, rebelling against lockdown. There's all of this stuff in the water. And I guess you guys with Image Comics dubbed this rural noir, which is a term that I have not encountered with any other comic book ever.
That's because Tim made it up.
Yeah,
he's such a trailblazer.
Yeah.
We pulled it out for butts, yeah.
Yeah, so, and reading, which I think was in the first trade paperback, the intro letter from Jeff Lemire, which I thought set the mood for the book extremely well. I was like, okay, rural noir, that must be the term they're really operating with. So did that come to you before you finished the first issue, or did that kind of evolve as you went? You said earlier that you started out saying, like, I want to do something with crime. So did you start saying crime, and then you were like, well, it could have this element, this element, this element, and before you knew it, it had become a completely original genre?
I mean, I don't know if I would call it completely original, because I would call Fargo in there and A Simple Plan in there and stuff like that. But I think what our thought on it was that, we wanted to do something. The thing that we liked about the original definition of a noir was that they're typically about a character who sort of, by their faults of their personality and who they are, sort of drive themselves to darkness, right? But there's detective noir and crime noir. There's all these other things, other kinds of subgenres in that sort of stuff, like the black and white LA crime noir stories and all that kind of thing. But I think when we were talking about, well, what's this going to feel like, we kind of threw out those, A Simple Plan and Fargo, and then I would always bring in these real crime stories from my hometown, like, because they were always insane. And the Zorse thing is basically a real story. I mean, I didn't, like, murdering the Zorse is like a real story in my memory anyway, that happened. And so it was stuff that we wanted we would pull these stories and say, it's a different kind of crime story because of where it takes place. And this means that you're not like running around in alleys, and you're not there's no neon signs, and there's
trench coats.
Right. Yeah. It's snowmobile jackets and back roads and, that kind of stuff, which I think we also wanted to sort of reinforce this idea that in American public culture, I noticed it growing up is that there's the idea that cities are this den of sin and terrible things happen there. And then I moved there and I was like, no, wait, where I used to live was where all the sin and terrible things happened.
Yeah.
So I think that was something we wanted to emphasize too, was like, there's this perception of small towns in America is like this is the real America. Is like, yeah, but if you ask me, from what I saw, lots of fucked up shit happens there.
Yeah.
The real America's not that great.
So
but,
yeah, it's almost like I don't know, like a Patagonia or Carhartt noir.
Carhartt Noir.
There you go.
That's funny.
But it's Carhartt noir of 2012, not the trendy Carhartt that hipsters wear now.
Right.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Actual workwear.
It's been around enough now that it's not cool anymore.
A Dickies noir, yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Okay, well that's very cool. I love that idea, and I do think, I was getting whiffs of some religious exposure in your background, from the writing, just from the way all the different characters are depicted, and it was one of those things where, like, if you didn't address people having religious reactions to this event, it would be so detached from the real world, right? Because it is a blatantly supernatural event, and it is going to impact the way people process this one way or the other. And I thought it kind of fanned out multiple directions, but very realistic. You have the opportunistic, like, preacher guy coming to town very early. You have one of the super religious people become a reviver and reenact a crucifixion. It goes nutty very quickly. But yeah, so I think that's really all I wanted to ask about the genre. But it's just one of those things where, like, the elevator pitch for it, I can't imagine, of like, oh, it's got this and it's got this and it's got this and it's got, I'm going to show you what political insurgency looks like. I'm going to show you, how religion and philosophy respond to this. And it's also going to be crime, and there's going to be violence, and there's going to be all this other stuff. And I'll, full disclosure, Alex and I are not big horror readers. It's got to be horror with a hook. It's got to be like,
I'm the same way.
Okay. Well, that's what I appreciate is, like, there's some really violent stuff in there that could have been you could have really made a meal out of it and grossed people out. But instead, like, I'm able to read it and not have to look away. It's like, it still hits me like, oh, that's really terrible. That little girl's clawing her own eyes out. But I think some artists would have been so indulgent with it that's what it would have overshadowed everything else in the book, as opposed to being part of the story.
Yeah, I mean, all the stuff you're talking about, like, when we started, we had the idea, but over time, with, like, all the other influences you're talking about, I think Tim was exploring a lot of the stuff that, like, he's very politically active, and we both have a similar opinion about organized religions and stuff like that. And so he was just getting into that. As far as the horror, I came into horror late. He was a long time horror fan. And so I think it translates into the artwork. I drew everything very normal, so that when something does happen, it's like, holy crap, I wasn't expecting that, you know? I feel like, especially horror comics, and I don't think it's a bad thing, but I think a lot of horror comics, you go into it and the artist really wants to show you that it's a horror comic. Everything looks dark and scary from the beginning. I kind of liken it to, like, Vince Vaughn's portrayal of Norman Bates in the Psycho remake. It's like, he already looks scary. He looks like somebody that would come into your shower and kill you.
Right.
And Anthony Perkins was not like that. I wanted to be the Anthony Perkins where it's just like, holy crap, this guy's going to kill me. And that's how I approached that artwork. It's I don't think I can do it the other way. I can't be like a Kyle Hotz or somebody like that.
Sure. Yeah. And you get the occasional accent of that with Jenny's cover art, where it's like, I think my favorite transition when reading in trade, which people will also experience in the compendium, is that one of the final pages of a late 20s, early 30s issue is Dana holding a gun to Martha's head. And in the trade, when you flip the page, you go to the cover art for the next issue, which is Jenny's take on the same scene. And it's very cool to watch, two different artists interpret the same moment. Of course, hers is setting up a then flashback to their childhood. So there's a kind of a new import on it there. but
Jenny
both of
is
them. What's
she's
that?
also not a Jenny is also not a horror. So you
Mhm.
have to.
That would be, I think that's probably news to like variant cover collectors of like, between this and Something's Killing the Children and other stuff, she gets
Not a horror person, but I think her aesthetic doesn't read horror.
right.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's why I think the way that we set the stuff up was that as we were getting the covers it was like lean into this sort of small beauty things.
Yeah.
That is what she does really strong. So you can make these sort of like creepy tinted things, but they're beautiful. And I think that also
Beautifully scary.
yeah, like has tension. I mean,
Yeah.
she'll watch horror movies all day, so she's not that kind of horror person. But her art doesn't sort of, scream like Mike said, like Kelly Jones or Bernie Wrightson or something like that. But it made us have to go. Well, this has to be sort of like a, elegant, beautiful moment, but also all the covers had to be a little bit off-putting or unsettling, or they had to deal with some sort of incongruity. It's like it's beautiful but disturbing. Like the one I always think of is when there's the one where M is in the water and there's all these dead fish around her.
Yes.
Like a beautiful illustration, but it's kind of that kind of stuff. Like I guess kind of Sandman, like how Sandman was beautiful and scary. That's what Jenny really was,
Yeah.
right? She's a sort of, if I'm going for some kind of comp there.
Yeah. By the way, I think I just did two of my questions in a row, Alex.
Yeah.
Not
all right.
on
No, well,
purpose. It just happened.
We can skip around here since you mentioned Jenny's covers, I definitely wanted to ask about that. Now, obviously, Jenny is someone that and works in your studio. And at the time, we were talking now, like in order to get Jenny to do a cover for you, like, it's pretty much impossible because she is arguably one of the most popular cover artists in the industry. I mean, every time I go to a convention and see what her line looks like, it's always kind of insane. But back when Revival started, it was pretty early in her career. So I was curious, as you were describing her covers and what they look like, what was the conversation like in terms of how those covers got done? Like how much information was she getting? Was it like you gave her a script thing? Obviously, if she's in the studio with her, you can just talk to her, but how much detail is she seeing Mike's art for the issues and then pulling moments out? Like just how did that work with these covers in specific for this book?
I mean, it depends on the issue because as much as we could, we tried to give her scripts to read and we tried to give her art to look at, but you make a monthly book, that isn't always the case, So, first we had it very well planned. Like, for issue 1 cover, Mike did a sketch. I shot reference for her up in my hometown. We picked that very specific sweater, like it was very guided. And then the one right behind your head with the Jesus,
yes.
That one I did a sketch of and gave it to her and said, here's what I'm thinking. And she was like, what are you doing?
She didn't want to do it.
She didn't want to do it, but it ended up being probably one of the most popular covers.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, that's interesting because one reason I have that cover and why I have it signed by the three of you is because that was the one that kind of brought my eye to Revival. Because as we talked about this book being,
she loves hearing that. You should tell her.
When this book first came out, I didn't read it because in my mind, I was one of those readers that like, oh, it's another zombie book, right? And I was like, okay, so I'm not into zombies, not into horror too much. And so I didn't pay attention to it. And then years later, I see that cover with, the character, it's issue 20. It's the character of M and she's jumping through the air and she's holding hands with Jesus. And I saw that and I was like, wait, isn't that the zombie book? And so I saw that was enough to draw my eye to kind of actually look into it and realize, oh, this is not like a Walking Dead clone, which in my mind, I had made that equivalency. So seeing that cover is what sparked me to like, let me check this out. Cause a book with a cover this weird, can't be what I think it was. So yeah. So something like, sometimes you had an idea like that where you had a weird idea and give it to her. Sometimes it was, she had a full script. So it did. And were there times when it was just, you needed a cool looking picture and like a pinup and that became the cover?
No.
Ooh, yes.
A lot of times. A lot of times we just give her an idea and sometimes she'd give a lot of pushback too. I remember the cover of John Blackdeer like made her cry when she did it. Because it really bothered her to have to look up reference of all these burn victims.
Oh yeah. Wow.
But it ends up making for a really emotionally arresting cover. So
Yeah, I mean, those are the covers that everybody remembers. So
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I mean, I think that's it's such a huge part of it. You look back and, um, I mean, she did all but one cover, right? You had Scotty Young do one of the covers, which I guess kind of made sense. That was like the first issue from Cooper's point of view.
yeah, it was Cooper's. Yeah.
Yeah, so having Scotty and his aesthetic, I guess, kind of made sense there. But was that just the reason you went out? And I mean, I guess also if you can get a Scotty Young cover, I mean,
Yeah.
speaking of popular cover artists in the industry, you know, Scotty's up there as well. Was it also just a matter of reaching out to another kind of well-known creator and getting that cover done? What was that specific process for getting Scotty to do that cover?
Well, we all knew each other. We're
Mhm.
all friends, and he lived here at the time, I think.
Oh, okay.
So I mean, it was just a matter of trying to get our friends to do stuff with us and and make it make sense. You know,
Sure.
it would have been hard to figure out a way to get him on the book otherwise. I think now everybody has a Scotty Young cover, and it makes sense because he does like the baby versions.
Hmm.
But then it was more of like, how do we explain this? You know?
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Listen, okay, so I guess my next question, I guess I want to go into kind of the mechanics of the story itself. I always wonder when you have a story like this, especially one that is at its core, as we talked about, there's a mystery to it, whether it's the mystery of the revival or the mystery of like a character thing like M's murder or whatever it is. But when you're approaching a story like this, how much do you have quote unquote planned beforehand? Is it a matter of, are you thinking of, here are the arcs I want these characters to go on, here's where I want the story to go? Do you know what the ultimate end is, but figure out the in between, like the stuff, the mile parks in between? Just how much did you guys have going in as you were discussing this book? Or was it about, here's the premise and then we figure out where we go from there? Because, and as you go through the book, as you move through the book, you get a lot of big character reveals, a lot of plot reveals. You know, the thing you think you're building towards, like the Edmund Holt character and what's he doing at town, and you know he has the tunnel and he's building this. You think this is coming to a head, and it does come to a head with that big explosion at the courthouse, only to then set up like the U.S. government and the military. So like Mike and I talk about how you guys kind of build tension in this small town to the point where there's a literal release of that tension only to build more tension on it. So how much going in did you guys have planned, or was it just how much you figuring out and talking about, well, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we did this? Or are you thinking about like when we want to put these twists in or these character reveals in?
It was all of that, actually.
Okay.
I mean, the one big one was that a part of Revival was sort of a reaction from Mike because he watched the last episode of Lost and was like, "What the fuck?" And it didn't seem like they had planned it seemed like they didn't know where they were going to go when they started. So one of the things we said was, let's not do that. And so our plan was, what if we knew the ending before we started? We even started. We knew what the ending was. We knew who killed them. We knew why the revivers came back. So,
okay.
So we knew those two things 100%, and we did them when we started. But everything else is sort of the way I always describe it is it's like driving in the fog at night with your headlights on. I know where we're going. I can see right in front of me, but I have to illuminate the rest of it as I go. So there you go. That is how we planned the rest of it. So we knew, we knew the last issue. We knew, the reveal of the killer. We knew all that stuff, but we let the story kind of take us, in directions. If there's one thing I would say I've learned from it is that having the big mystery also be the sort of central emotional thing works out great. It keeps people reading, but it also makes them go like, yeah, but I don't care about the fucking government. I want to see what's up with Em and Dana. So it had like a sort of twofold thing where it's like we wanted to be able to take side hustles and little different paths on the river, as it were, to explore different characters. And people would go along with us, but they would also be like, okay, yeah, great. Get back to the mystery, right? Like that. And so that was also kind of an education.
That's so smaller things like a character choice, like taking a character like Ibrahim and having him go from like a CDC doctor to also being like a CIA agent or whatever, or like I'm guessing like having an Amish ninja assassin wasn't always in the
No, no.
in the
He's a
story Bible.
samurai. She's
This,
a
yeah.
samurai, not a ninja.
Well,
She's
I'm assuming because she's ostracized from her own people, like she's living. So
she's a
you
Ronin.
know,
Yeah.
yeah, close to a Ronin. There we go. Yeah. She's a unaffiliated samurai there. But I'm guessing was something like that. I mean, because that sounds like, and I mean this in a non-pejorative way, like that sounds like two people that work together at lunch, just like shooting ideas back and forth, and you end up with Amish samurai
That was one
assassin.
of our early disagreements, I think.
Okay,
I
okay.
did not like the idea of the samurai lady, but he really wanted it. And the thing about a lot of the stuff in Revival, a lot of the stuff I was didn't initially go for ended up being very, very interesting, and I'd say in hindsight, good parts of the book. I think it's a better book because of those weird things. And it just kind of is a testament to collaboration as an art form, you know. The uh yeah, that those things, when you're doing something long enough, weird stuff gets in there. I think it makes it a better book.
Well, and I think, I mean, also, yes, it's a strange thing that happens, but like, and as odd as incongruous as that character may be, like there are some really great moments with those characters because you're talking about mothers and daughters and things of that. Like there are larger things at play with both Dana and Cooper and M and her child isn't born. So like
Hmm.
you find these deeper moments in these conversations
Hmm.
in a weird supernatural story that also has this very strange and odd character. So yeah, there you get the introduction is very can be very jarring, and very like what the hell is this? But then
Yeah.
as the story goes on, there are layers to it because yes, she's also a mother. She has a daughter, and we see what their relationship is like and all of that. So you get these layers and yeah, so there are things that come out of it. Yeah, I guess that comes out of it that wouldn't have come if you didn't, decide to put this seemingly random character drop it into the story. So
Yeah.
Well, one of the things we kept talking about was that to make a small town feel real, you have to have completely fucking weird shit in it. Because
Yeah.
if you live in a small,
Nobody believes it.
yeah,
Yeah.
like the character of Edmund was sort of based on, inspired by a real guy, and that's in my hometown. We had Bill Rebane, who was the guy who directed Giant Spider Invasion, who built the giant spiders at my college that I went to, the the 2 year college I went to. So, weird shit happened there anyway. You couldn't ignore, those the incongruities and the unpredictability of a small town. If you don't have that, then it doesn't feel real, And like I mean, part of the initial inspiration for this was, and sort of the militia guys was based on Tigerton, Wisconsin, which is a real place near my house where I grew up, where they had a militia that took over the town, and the Posse Comitatus took over that city, and that's real. That really happened, and so we had to keep adding that kind of seemingly out of nowhere stuff that is actually like, an Amish samurai completely fits in to the world in which, the guy who directed Giant Spider Invasion was right near the town that was taken over by a militia, and they had to send the federal government in to kick them out. So, like, if I
so
put an Amish ninja in Chicago, would anyone blink? I don't know. So,
maybe not. Yeah. So I guess given that so much of it, the setting is obviously very, very real. I know because I did a thing when I started reading the book, like I had to pull up Google Maps real quick here. I want to see where Wausau is. And then you see the surrounding towns, like, okay, well, I have a sense of geography and they're using the geography, which tells me that there's intimate knowledge here. But so two questions. Is there like an Amish community in the area? I would have questioned that before, but talking to you now, clearly there is. And
yeah.
I'm fairly aware there's a decent Hmong population there as well, right? I know it's big in Minnesota. I didn't know if it was also Minnesota, Wisconsin. So all those things are pulled from in terms of the types of people you would see in this town.
Oh yeah, Mei Tao
Okay.
is Laotian Hmong. She's second generation.
Mm-hmm.
That is completely real. Hmong people started coming to Wausau, brought by church groups in the early '80s, about 1979, 1980. right when I was a kid. So that was like a huge thing when I was a kid. And the same kind of shit going around. The immigrants are eating the ducks. That shit was happening. People were saying lies like that when I was a kid. The same things that Trump is throwing on Haitians now, right-wing nutters try to do in my town when I was a kid. So, that stuff is all real and was put into the book as well because it's honest. And we had to, you can't set something in Wassel without having a Larry Shamon character because they're a significant portion of the population.
Yeah, but I guess that's one of those things that an outside reader wouldn't. Yeah. They wouldn't expect that. But you, as someone who lived it, or anyone who's in the area, would then pick up a book like that and notice that it was missing. Like you're saying, it's that significant that you couldn't tell this story of this area without adding that character or those types of characters, that community. But someone from the outside may look at that and wouldn't know the difference either way. But it matters to you in terms of, this is the town it is. These are the people that make up the town. So it's important that they're here. Right.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, but I think one thing Alex was saying when we were talking about one of these volumes was like, I think the thing that dates the book the most, in a sad way, is like, remember when like Fringe was Fringe? Like, because you just said like, oh yeah, well, in order to have that small town feel, Fringe people would say, weird stuff about, immigrants and stuff like that. And then you very clearly reference how it is on the national political debate stage now.
Yeah.
And it's like, that changed quickly.
Yeah, I think that's not specific to entertainment or fiction in general. I think that's just, yeah.
Is it weird though? Because I mean, looking at this book, the Edmund Holt character is the Fringe character, and I think there's a lot of small towns in this country like that have that weirdo guy, and that there are people in the town who maybe agree with him or did, but they don't say it out loud. And so he was a character in 2012. You're like, oh wow, look at this guy. He's saying the thing, he's saying the quiet part out loud. Now that rhetoric is literally the mainstream. That guy wouldn't be the outsider. He wouldn't have to try to rally people to his side. He wouldn't have to wait till things got bad in town. Like, they would already be there. And then there's the idea of the large scale quarantine. So like, is it weird looking at this book now and seeing how, in a lot of ways, unfortunately prescient it is, and how it reads differently now in terms of what our attitudes towards some of these ideas would be? Because, life has imitated art in like the worst possible ways. So when you look back on it now, like how do you feel about that? Is it just the cycle of fiction, Mike, like you said, or is there something larger to be said about kind of how society moves now?
Well, we inadvertently predicted a pandemic.
Yeah.
And the right-wingification of rural America. So
yeah,
good on us.
It's validated you as a prophet.
Yes.
If you had a solution, that'd be great. Maybe
that was really,
the follow-up book.
It's just, that's just him noticing things, really. I mean, that was the pandemic thing is more of like, that's like, we were looking at it as like, what would happen if this happened? Right. That was just an unfortunate prediction, but yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
The political stuff is, Tim's always keeping tabs on that, even back then.
So if we could real quick maybe venture into this upcoming adaptation, and I know you guys, I don't know how much you guys can or cannot say, but because of that the world, our world, society has caught up in some ways to some of the ideas in the book. Is there anything you can comment in terms of where the show will be set? Because of our idea, again, of fringe right-wing politics are different. Even back then, the idea of our militias and things like that, they were still the underground. Our idea of large-scale quarantine is different now. Do you see that in any way? I guess what I'm saying is, how would you write this book now? How would you approach those ideas now in the world in the 2024 world, with what we know of our world, both politically, and just as society? How would things tweak? And as opposed to, speculating on how the show will or will not do that, how would you guys approach it now with these same ideas?
I don't know if you have to change anything. I think people actually witnessing it makes it scarier. I don't know. It's like they know this can happen now. Yeah. I don't know if you need to change that much. Just what I've seen of the show and thinking about that, I'm like, this is actually scarier now. Some of that stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think the only thing I don't know if I would change it, but the way people reacted to lockdowns and stuff in Revival, which, you know, obviously there was people who were resisting, people thought it was a hoax, all the things that we thought would happen happened 100%.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I would change now is I would be like, oh, people would have been going out of their fucking minds. Like they had people like sort of strained and sort of like, and you know, there were little riots and stuff in the story. Like things did happen, but like, I think we were a little bit too nice. We were a little too.
Yeah.
And I
that
think
border would have been being crossed every damn minute of every damn
To be
day.
fair, they were tunneling out. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was
I guess what they were saying is they wouldn't bother tunneling, right? That it would just
No,
they
just
just
snap,
be-
right?
right.
What are you
There's
gonna
no
do?
subtlety. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
But I think that, and then the answer, kind of the thing I would do, because part of the in a weird way, the book I've done recently, Local Man, which is also set in a rural Wisconsin place, but it made up one because I learned my lesson: don't set things in a real place; they'll get mad at you. But that one is sort of the like, well, here's
didn't get the key to the city.
yeah, they like it, but it's always like, you know, just people emailing and saying, hey, I want to be in a TV show, and I'm like, it's in Canada, I don't think it's gonna work. But the Local Man kind of is this is how shit really worked to some degree, like, oh, you know, and just kind of the way that, you know, people are taken advantage of and stuff, I think, or the way that they want to be taken advantage of. I think that's the thing is that I didn't realize how badly people would want to be lied to. And that's, I think that I try to put that in Local Man, but I think that is something we kind of missed that in Revival, just because I didn't want to believe people would want to be lied to. I thought there would still be some version of the show. I knew there would be a Joe Rogan, and I knew there would be all those kind of, you know, those kind of people. You know, I knew there'd be a Margie Taylor Greene. I knew there'd be all those things, but I didn't know that there would be people that would go, yes, give it to me, put it in my face, lie to me, just tell me terrible, dumb things that can't be true.
Yeah.
That's the thing I feel like I was a little wrong about.
Yes,
if
I
you
guess
had predicted if you had predicted that accurately, I think that then I think people would question your view on humanity, right, on society. You'd be
yeah, no, I
too
mean,
much of a cynic.
if you
Like,
had
there's no way we
revivers-
could do that. Yeah,
if you had revivers taking like ivermectin or something to try to cure themselves, it would have been, you would have been too prophetic. Like there's the right amount for a writer, and then there's like, all right, that's over the line, buddy. But I guess my variation on Alex's question is, like, I guess in production talks or anything like that, is there any concern that people who are not aware of the source material, which I think will be a lot of the TV audience, will think that this is reactive to like COVID stuff rather than predictive of?
You know, I haven't thought about that.
It'll
That's
definitely
interesting.
happen. It'll definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
Well,
there's
but that's
like-
where like the book readers love being like, well, actually,
actually, this book came out like,
Well,
you know,
so you just
in
need to
that
station us everywhere.
in that case, I harness the power of fandom. Go ahead, go. Yeah.
But I think it's not like it ends up giving you too much of an excuse per se. But I think, you know, the way that they approach the TV show, as far as Mike and I know, and what we've read and what we've seen, the dailies and stuff, you know, they're just saying like, it's not super important when this takes place. It's not super important if COVID is something that you just don't need to mention it, right? It's just sort of, here is the story that we're presenting, and here is the characters. And, you know, I think the trying to fit it into the real world right now, I mean, even like, you know, regular like dumbass TV shows no one mentions COVID, right?
Mhm.
Like, no, you
Right.
know, I don't know. I don't watch anything on TV anymore. But if Bones were still on, they don't have an episode where they're like, remember that time during COVID? Like they just fucking
Yeah,
ignore
yeah,
it,
yeah.
right?
No, that's a very fair point.
I love that he just mentioned the only show that we can remember from when we were in the studio together.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't watch anything on TV. I don't know.
Bones.
Now I'm
All I
actually trying to
remember-
picture what that storyline would be, and that's a wild storyline
Ah,
of Bones
that's
being like, you know,
funny.
we're doing the COVID episode. That's
Oh yeah,
fantastic.
sure. That's
Yeah.
hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Maybe Lost would have done it if they, you know, stuck around longer. stuck the
Yeah.
I
landing.
mean,
Or
you never really see the outside world in Revival, so
That is true.
it does have sort of a timeless feel. In fact, when Dana goes to New York, I thought it felt weird to draw that actually, because
Yeah.
it just did. It's like we've set up this little world,
Yeah.
so I think it's translatable to any time.
Well, I think the idea also that it's sent like during what's effectively like an endless winter, right? So
Right.
it's just a northern Midwest. It's just snowing the whole time. It's
Yeah.
Well,
just
that's
kind of
what
dark and
Warsaw
gray.
is.
Yeah, yeah.
Dead of summer, it's like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was also, but speaking of things I would change, I wouldn't set it during winter because there is no fucking winter anymore. And those poor people
Right. Yeah.
trying to shoot snow,
Yeah.
suffering to try to get snow and stuff like that. Yeah. Lesson learned. Climate change fucked us on
Yeah.
making Revival very accurate.
Endless summer now. Now it's just 95 in the
Yeah.
middle of Wisconsin all summer there.
Yeah.
This is one of your questions, Mike. I apologize, but wondering about the art. We touched on this a little bit. So this question to you, Mike, about I guess saying that you came to horror late and so you weren't thinking of it like a like a horror artist would in terms of what you're presenting on the page. I'm curious. One of the things that I really love and that Mike and I talked about is that the color palette choice in terms of how it looks visually, it's very easy read in that a lot of horror books, regardless of what it is, you get a tone based on what it looks like on the page, just without knowing the action or reading anything. You just looking at the art, a lot of very dark. It's very gritty, very washed out, very all that. What's presented here in Revival is very bright. Not like neon bright, but it's very clean and very clear. And I wonder, was that a again specific choices made between you and Mark Englert in terms of what it wanted to look like?
Not a specific choice, but yeah, this is a Midsummer, not a Hereditary. This is like you're gonna see all the terrible things. You're not gonna like there's not a lot of night scenes in this comic.
Yeah.
It's all the terrible things happen. Yeah,
not a lot of
it happens during the day. And part of that's just because that's how I draw. I don't draw a lot of shadow stuff, and Mark is one of those guys that can, he can do anything, and he's an artist in his own right, and he added what needed. We barely gave him any notes on.
Yeah, hardly ever. Well, I think the thing we kind of inadvertently decided early, which was that like horror comics tend to choose, you can't control surprise, you can't jump scare anybody in comics, but horror is very effective in comics because this is a whole treatise, but basically you're drawn into the story and you supply what's in between those panels, right? And so they can control how you feel and make you unsettled, and that's why all those old EC comics, and they're so effective because they control how you feel, and then it's a vibe. That's how horror works in comics. It's a vibe. It's not a jump scare. It's a feeling, and I think the horror comics tend to be associated then with like garish colors like black and I mean purple and green put together and all this sort of stuff, so that it feels that vibe is maintained. And I think something we decided is, well, what if that feeling is a surprise when it happens? Like instead of you knowing it's going to be, here's the Crypt Keeper and he's all purple and green and he's really garish and he's holding a bright red, severed head or whatever. We were saying, well, let's when the horror shows up, it's still the vibe, except you weren't expecting it.
Yeah, lull you into by presenting everything as normal as anything else, and then boo, that's how you scare somebody. It's like, oh, everything's normal. Just a page of guts.
Yeah. Well, I think in that sense, you guys succeeded marvelously, because I think it makes Revival feel like a different kind of horror book because of that. And it goes back, I think, to what we talked about earlier of the multi-genre possibilities of this story, that at its core, maybe it's horror, or at its core, it may be supernatural. At its core, it may be crime, mystery, or whatever. Having all those mixes in there. So yeah, when you do have a page and it's like a bunch of body parts that fall out of a truck or whatever, or the upper torso of a reviver that's been severed in a butcher shop or something like that. When you have those moments, they do stand out. But you're right, there is a sense of you are just looking at a normal, everyday, run of the mill Midwestern town.
I mean, that's why those things we wanted. I mean, we wanted those possibilities. That adds to the mystery. It's like, are those ghosts out in the woods? Are those aliens?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it could be anything.
Yeah.
You know, we wanted people to wonder. That's the whole point of the story.
And you guys threw that stuff out right at the beginning. Like you had the dead come back. You had those what we now know as souls. You had them out there. So you guys weren't hiding the ball in any way in terms of what the elements are going to be.
Everything's there in the first issue.
Yeah, exactly. You put it all in play and put it all out there, and then it did very much seem like you just kind of let the chips fall because you brought in a lot of characters early on too. The first trade, Mike and I are talking about them in the deluxe volume, so that's 2 trades together there. There's a ton of characters thrown out there. And at the time, as a reader, you don't know. I mean, aside from like the Cypress sisters, you don't really know who's going to be significantly important to the story. Yeah, I think at that point, you still don't know which people who can die or who's going to live, who's going to make it through. There's a lot of mystery there, and there's just a lot of stuff thrown at you. But you're right. Everything that is going to be important in the story. And I guess that comes from you guys knowing what the ultimate end was going to be, right? The fact that you knew what that end was, you could place stuff in the front and then know you're going to get back to it at the end eventually. But in the meantime, you have this playground to go in to just kind of pull things here and there, bring new characters in, phase characters out, and do whatever. But yeah, I think looking back on it now, having, you know, when you have the full story there, looking back at the beginning, you can see you guys are telling us what's important by showing us what's there in that first issue.
But like going on the color thing too, I was thinking about is one of the things I remember we talked about is like The Walking Dead, we have to differentiate ourselves from it a little. So The Walking Dead is black and white, but that's also sort of the theme of the book, right? Like it's everything is not black and white, right? It's like that's it. And so if ours was, well, everything is shown in the daylight. Everything is all this sort of presentation by small towns is everything's cozy and great, and there's nothing underneath it. You know, then it had to play into the way we presented the visuals as well.
All right. Well, I think that's our final question about the material, but obviously the TV show. But if there's anything coming up for either of you or both of you that you'd like to plug, we like to give people a minute to talk about what we should be pulling or our final order cut off or whatever.
I know you guys have the Archie book, right? The Mr. Justice book coming out. I know that you guys have that on the schedule coming up soon, but what else do you guys have coming down the line that you can plug, at least that you can officially say?
Well, there's the Archie thing, which is sort of like Watchmen Archie. Archie's done superheroes, but I've never seen it like this before. So there's that, and I have a 2-part Constantine story and a Brave and the Bold coming up, and I'm working on Borderlands at Dark Horse. A bunch of other stuff that I won't mention because I don't know.
Sure.
Fair enough.
We should say that this interview will run after New York Comic Con. So if anything that you think is going to be or know is going to be announced then,
you're just trying to squeeze every little bit of insider.
I'm trying to get.
I'm always told that I'd never promote my stuff enough, and it's because I forget. I don't know what I'm doing. I didn't know that one of my books was out last week.
I guess that happens.
Yeah.
Tim, what about you? I know you have the Rogue book coming out, right? The Savage Land.
Yeah, the Rogue Savage Land that got me in trouble, of course. And then
I did see that online. Got you in trouble? Of course it did. Yeah.
Let's see. Turtles of Grayskull, Ninja Turtles and He-Man put together. Issue 2 comes out. Issue 1 was out, so it's out in 2-3 weeks. And then Local Man's 25, the Images of Tomorrow final issue comes out on October 16th. And look at my schedule. Yeah, I think that's most of them for now, right? Yeah, right. Okay. Do I have some other X-Men thing? Oh, I can't talk about it. Okay, so I think they'll announce some shit at New York Comic Con, then I'll be able to say it.
All right, excellent.
Good deal.
We'll look forward to that, definitely.
Thank you both so much for your time. wish you, all the luck and success in the world on the TV show adaptation. I can't tell you how many artists and writers we've talked to that, their stuff's been optioned and been sitting there forever.
Well, that was us.
I mean,
Revival was that, right?
Right. In option purgatory.
We're very familiar. Both of us have gone through it.
Real quick before we sign off, Mike, how quickly after the book came out was like the first option for, because it was pretty quick, right? When it first launched, the idea that it would be turned into something. So it has to be over a decade now that this has been
there
in
had
the
been
works.
adaptation attempts,
I feel
right?
like it was
a short
within
film.
the first year or so, wasn't it?
Yeah, because we did the thing with NBC, which is funny.
Yeah.
It went back. Now it's at NBC again. But we sold to NBC for 2 years, and then the rights came back to us. And then Shatterglass worked out for 7 years. So,
And they're really kind of behind the show even happening.
Yeah, without Shatterglass, nothing happens for sure. So Luke Boyce has worked on Revival more than Mike and I put together.
Yeah, he really kind of has in hindsight.
Yeah.
He's done a lot of the work.
Yeah.
Most of the work.
Very interesting.
As far as TV goes, especially,
Yeah. Well, I mean, but with that much time and energy put into it, you've got to feel as good as you can from your vantage point about the care it's being handled with and, how it's going to take shape.
Yeah, I've allowed myself to get excited now. I spent many years asking people to not talk to me.
But it's actually happening now. They're shooting, right? I mean, I saw the Melanie Scrofano who plays Dana.
Yeah.
Right. She posted, I guess it's just the one pic of her in
the
uniform.
I tell you,
and they put the freckles right across her cheek and her nose, and it
Look
looks
at
like
it.
it's right out of the pen. It looks like right out of one of your drawings, Mike.
that's the part when people talk about it, that's the part that got to me, because it's just really weird to think of people being paid in another place to take something that we came up with seriously. You know what I mean? It's just very strange, because I only think that I do that or Tim does that. I don't think of other people like, hey guys, let's get in a room and talk about how we're going to make this thing that these guys make. You know what I mean?
Sure.
That really kind of weirds me out.
But
I like it.
We have dailies, so I can't show you. I just flipped.
We
get dailies, so we get to see.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so
that's awesome.
There have been times where I look at the dailies and I'm like, it's insane. That is exactly out of the comic. I cannot believe what I'm looking at.
Yeah, it's crazy. Some of it is.
They got the sweater.
Yeah.
The one from issue 1 here.
They got the sweater.
The one that M is wearing.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic.
And some of the details and stuff that they really, it's because Luke knows us and we took him to Wausau and made him go there. Like all these details that I don't think anybody else would have cared about. They're in there.
He really is kind of the champion.
Yeah, the keeper of Revival is his.
So
that's great.
I guess now that spun one more question for me, which is, are they going to be treating each issue kind of as a template for an episode and try to do like 47 episodes over 5 seasons, or are they gonna like prestige it and do like here's 12 1-hour episodes and this is the whole series?
I'm not. I think that lies under the
classified. Yeah,
tell
that's
you.
fine.
Yeah. Because then people could then deduce like where the seasons break and all that stuff. Yeah. We don't want to give that away. We want folks to watch all the way through.
Yeah, it won't stop us from speculating wildly, but
hey,
we're better off without information.
People do with shows. That's what you're supposed to do. Yeah.
Indeed.
So, all right. Well, congratulations and thank you guys both so much. It's been totally awesome to talk to you.
Thank you guys. This is great.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.